There was a bristlecone pine called Prometheus. Found in the Great Basin by a graduate student, Prometheus was subject to multiple core samples as the student tried to establish overlapping cores within the tree to form a complete dendrochronological record. Failing to do so, he asked for and received permission from the Forest Service to cut down the tree. After he'd done so, the student discovered the tree he had just killed was one of the oldest organisms ever to have been discovered, being close to 5,000 years old. The Prometheus tree has since become something of a symbol for martyrdom in science, an almost mythic association of knowledge and death. Hello everybody! Today I'm going to review The Stone Weta by Octavia Cade. This is a short novel. It is slightly futuristic science fiction, and it is about an underground network of ecological and climate scientists who are smuggling and caching climate data to preserve it from political and economic forces that want to purge or suppress that knowledge, sometimes violently. The story shifts perspectives between the codenamed scientists, who are all women, and is interspersed with factual sections about the flora or fauna that the women have taken their code names from. So you have characters like the sand cat, the Japanese sea star, the fish scale gecko, the resurrection plant, and the Antarctic lichen, to name just a few. So the overall plot is about how they're trying to save data from being deleted or from being censored. They're trying to preserve the original data, especially so that they can compare it to the censored or rewritten versions. It's all about saving the actual research when it is being suppressed, sometimes in violent ways, like scientists being disappeared, or in more subtle ways, like banning certain keywords or changing the wording of things in actual publications. And a lot of the plot has to do with the fear that all of these scientists have that they might be discovered, and they have to decide how far each of them is willing to go in their resistance and how much they will individually sacrifice to quite literally save the planet. And the stakes are pretty high for them, as they have recently lost one of their own operatives, Bristlecone Pine, who has disappeared, and they presume that she is dead. And if so, if she was presumably abducted and then killed, who did it, and are they also in danger? When I describe this scenario, this plot, it almost sounds absurd, like it's this exaggerated version of reality. Like, the scientific community doesn't really work this way, does it? There isn't that much danger in being a scientist, especially when you're just dealing with data. But the reality of it started to creep up on me while I was reading the book. We like to think of science as being a neutral discipline, that it's science for the sake of science and facts are facts are facts. But actually, science sits at this conjunction of truth and money, values and beliefs, and really messy human politics. Many people may be familiar with similar events that have happened recently in the real world. Things like trying to save ancient cultural heritage sites from ISIS invasions, or the pretty successful attempt at saving hundreds of thousands of ancient manuscripts in Timbuktu when Al-Qaeda invaded, which is actually an event referenced in The Stone Weta. So these things really happen, and Cade just kind of hands you this kind of chillingly realistic novel about extreme repercussions for climate scientists who are trying to speak to this scientific truth while being slammed constantly by governments and economic systems that benefit from ignoring climate change. I'm also quite sure that this book was inspired by the real events of the current US administration purging climate data after the 2016 elections. That was literally making headlines when I read the short story that this novel is based on a few years ago. So I think it goes without saying that I really loved the premise of this story. I just thoroughly enjoyed the topics and the themes that it is engaging with, and I think it has something very important to say about right now. Like, it's very relevant to our lives right now. I also really enjoyed the way that it's written. I think it's a bit difficult to pull off this format where you're kind of sliding these factual sections into the narrative. It can be quite clunky, it can be very interruptive to the narrative, but I think Cade is quite good at it. And reading this reminded me of some of the short fiction I've read by Sophia Samatar, like Ogres of East Africa, that does a similar thing very successfully, and I enjoy it when it's done well. I do think that some people might find this a little bit dry or too factual, but I also think it's important to realize two things. One is that the story is being told through intentionally reserved characters who do believe very strongly in what they're doing and love the details of their scientific work. The second thing is that Cade is, I believe, actually a science communicator, and she is conveying a lot about how the scientific community works and a lot of scientific information, period, through the fiction in this. I think it's done very successfully, but I also think it's a style that some people may not really like. If you enjoy harder, more scientific science fiction, you'll probably like this. I think The Stone Weta is a fantastic little novel about fighting back and resisting in the scientific community, and if you read it and you hear alarm bells ringing because you recognize what's going on, then it has done its job.